what happens when one of metal's most iconic bands, bets it all on a release that divides fans. World Painted Blood. Was it Slayer's return to form, or the beginning of the end? Today we're going to unravel this polarizing chapter in their legacy. In October of 2008, Slayer was looking to return to form after 18 years of triumphs and lows. This time around, Slayer would try to revive some of that old Slayer magic that made them stand out and become the band that a lot of other bands wanted to imitate. In 2001, after the release of God Hates Us All, Hanneman helped Lombardo get back into the Slayer fold. They would release a pretty successful album in 2006 and return to the studio in 2008 to begin working on their 11th album. Hanneman set the tone pretty early by bringing in 3 tracks that he had already demoed out in October of 2008, and this would start the recording process for the band. The rest of the album would feature tracks that they would collectively work on together in the studio, a new precedent for the band, who was used to just bringing in complete tracks and not bringing in demos that they could work on together. Sadly, Tom's sister at this time was going through cancer treatments, and he would have to split his time between going to the hospital and going to the studio, so his mind really wasn't too present on working on this album. The majority of the tracking this album would happen between March and August of 2009. The first taste of this new music that Slayer fans would get would be Psychopathy Red, which was sadly leaked online October 29, 2008. So this was even before they began recording the whole album. This would actually become the first single for the album, which would be released on August 18th, 2009. Hate Worldwide was the second single, which was released on July 28th, 2009. Then the entire album, World Painted Blood, would be released on November 3rd, 2009. It would quickly peak at number 12 on the US Billboard 200 and number 5 on the top hard rock albums. Surprisingly, even though they charted in most major territories, this album did not sell as well as albums they had in the past. Hate Worldwide and World Painted Blood would go on to gain Grammy nominations, but both would lose. Then the last single for the album was the title track, and it would be released a full year later, on November 26, 2010, and it had an animated music video. Hanneman, King, and Araya all contributed to lyrics on this album. Hanneman composed instrumentals for 6 of the tracks, and would work on lyrics with Araya for 4 of those tracks. And then King brought in 5 different tracks, and he would write all the lyrics for those tracks by himself. The themes on this album remain much the same for Slayer, touching on apocalyptic events, disease, war, serial killers, and the occult. Notable tracks include World Painted Blood, Hate Worldwide, Human Strain, and Beauty Through Order. While the lyrical content stays the same, some fans might find this really repetitive. Like I mentioned before, the writing process was a little bit different this time. Hanneman would bring in his own demos, and King would bring in his own demos, and then they would work together in the studio to flesh them out. So they let Dave Lombardo have a say in how these tracks were arranged a little bit more, because it sounds like he didn't really have much of a say back in the day. The 2 guitarists would just bring in the tracks already finished, and then they would just record them. I think this allowed Slayer to stay a little bit more fresh, and gave opportunities for new ideas that they might not have tried out in the past. The guitar work on this album is pretty classic Slayer, with a lot of classic rhythms and really chaotic solos, and I think it works in favor of the album for the most part. After exploring some different musical directions, a return to form is what was needed for Slayer at the time. For the recording on this album, Slayer used their signature combination. They had the Marshall JCM 800s and Marshall cabs, Kerry King used his BC Rich guitars, and Jeff Hanneman used his ESP signature guitars. So now I want to talk some more about the songs, and then get into some of my favorite riffs. So today I'm going to be using my Jackson. It has the EMG 8185 combo, and that'll be going into the Nembrini MRH 810, since Slayer loved to use Marshalls, so I'm just using their built-in IR loader, and they had a V30 in there. So track number 1 is World Painted Blood. It's my favorite track on the album, and it focuses on the end of days written in modern times by Araya and Hanneman. The chugging riff at the beginning and the bridge riff stand among Slayer's best. Despite it being a top song for Slayer, and a top 5 song for me, the band has only performed this song 367 times live, which was way less than I thought it would be, and that makes it their 26th most played song. So track number 2 is Unit 731. This short and intense track deals with the horrific experimentation that happened in Japan during World War II. It's really reminiscent of Rain and Blood Slayer. It packs a big punch and it doesn't overstay its welcome. Track number 3 is Snuff. This is a frantic and fast-paced song with no lyrical concept. Now this is according to Slayer, but a lot of fans feel that it has to do with snuff films. I think this song has a really catchy chorus with a really good riff under it. It's pretty groovy and intricate and I really like it. So track 4 is Beauty Through Order. This song is focused on Elizabeth Bathory.
Yes, monsieur, the Countess Elizabeth Bathory.
who was a notorious Hungarian serial killer. This track has a very serious Seasons in the Abyss vibe. Jeff Hanneman had wanted to write about Elizabeth Bathory for a while. He just couldn't figure out a really good angle for it. Then he was finally able to find an angle for the lyrics. This is also one of the rarest songs to see live, having only been performed 37 times. Track 5 is Hate Worldwide. It's the second single from the album. It's a pretty straightforward Kerry King track about his disdain for organized religion. This is the song from the album that's played the most live, at 657 live performances. Track number 6 is Public Display of Dismemberment. It's another fast Rain and Blood type track, possibly commenting on how other countries deal with criminals. I took a look at the lyrics for this one because that's what a lot of people said online, and I don't see it really. I think it has to do with what would happen if the world order broke down, but you guys can let me know what you think in the comments as well. Track number 7 is Human Strain. A song that's pretty close to my heart because my teenage band used to play this all the time because it's a really easy track to play and really easy to nail, and it's just a lot of fun. I think it's one of their most underrated tracks, and it deals with infectious disease taking out the entire planet. Track number 8 is Americon, another Kerry King track, but this one deals with America feeling the need to be the world police. Track number 9 is Psychopathy Red. The first single that was released for this album, but it wasn't really. It was leaked online, and then they released it officially as the first single in April of 2009. It's another Jeff Hanneman track, and it's really Rain and Blood inspired. It's about the serial killer, the Butcher of Rostov, and it takes a look at how he killed for sexual gratification. Track number 10 is Playing with Dolls. This is a fan favorite track from what I could find online. This is the only track on the album where everyone worked collaboratively together. It's about a kid witnessing a serial killer commit murders. Then lastly, we have track number 11, Not of This God. It's another straightforward Kerry King, I Hate Religion track, and it ends the album on a pretty classic Slayer note. So now I want to get to some of my final thoughts on the album. So when I was writing the script for this video, I came into it with the thought that I was going to talk about how underrated this Slayer album was and that how more people needed to pay attention to it because it was a really good album. I absolutely loved this album when I was a teenager. It was the first Slayer album that was new to me because it had just come out around the time that I first got into them, so it was really important to me as a teenager. But now as an adult, re-listening to it, I find that the rose-colored glasses were a little too strong and it's rated exactly where it needs to be. The writing on this album is a good mix between Hanneman and King, but they don't really collaborate like they do in some of the past albums. It's either a Hanneman track or a King track, which maybe doesn't work in his favor a lot. What's always worked really well for Slayer is when they collaborate, but I also enjoy Hanneman's writing a little bit more than King's writing, so those tracks that Hanneman wrote, I really love. And I find myself really liking a few of Kerry King's tracks, but not a lot of them. But it was nice to see that Hanneman got his mojo back on this album. World Painted Blood has some really high highs, like the title track, Beauty Through Order, Human Strain, Hate Worldwide, and Psychopathy Red. I think those are all really strong tracks. And what I think makes them really strong, for a few of them, is that Hanneman wrote the instrumentals, and he helped write the lyrics with Araya. I really love that combination in Slayer. I think it comes up with some of their best tracks, and it doesn't disappoint me here. The title track, World Painted Blood, is a top 5 Slayer song for me. I really love everything about that song. It's got a really cool bridge, a really good slow intro that builds up into a really just fast riff, and I think it's got a really catchy chorus. And like I said, Hanneman and Araya always combine to make my favorite Slayer tracks. There's definitely some King tracks that I do love, but those two are the combination that I think works best. But then on the other side, I think this album has a lot of filler. There's a lot of tracks that just harken back to older days, but they don't reach that same sort of aggression or excitement that I used to get from tracks that are on Rain and Blood or South of Heaven or Seasons in the Abyss. I know a lot of people love Playing with Dolls.
Oh boy, you are super fruity, aren't you?
No. But I just don't see the appeal of that song. The second verse in that song is really cool, but there's not much else that appeals to me in that song. And I think the title of the song and the lyrics are just like a little cringy. But I think the worst part of this album has to be the production. The guitars just sound really weak. There's not a lot of gain on them. I don't know what they were going for in this album. I know this album was made during like the loudness wars, and so it's really loud, and it's just, it does not sound very good to me. The guitars are just too scratchy, and there's too much of a mid-punch in there. It just doesn't have that nice balanced guitar tone like they always do. And I think that's a disservice to this album. This album falls into the category of like a legacy band trying to throw it back to their older days to try and revive some of what made them special, and it works in some parts and it just does not work in some other ones. It's kind of like Death Magnetic because they came out right at the same time. I think I favor Death Magnetic more because I think Metallica returned to form and they actually wrote good songs for the majority of that album, where I think this is like a half and half really good, half and half really bad. So all that to say, I think World Painted Blood is solid, but it's not this underrated gem that everyone needs to hear. But it does have some songs that are underrated that I think everyone needs to hear, like World Painted Blood, Human Strain I love, Hey Worldwide, American's pretty cool, Beauty Through Order. If you haven't checked out those tracks, I think you should, because you're missing out. Especially Human Strain, my thrash band when we were teenagers, we used to cover that all the time. It's really fun, nice, easy track that's really cool. So, if you enjoyed this video, I think you should check this video out right here. I did a whole video on Seasons in the Abyss and what made that album special. I looked at the songs on the album, looked at the history behind the album, and looked at some of the recording process. So if you enjoyed this video, I think you might enjoy that one. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.